Welcome and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Bob Wilson and I'm the Chief Security Officer for the Jewish Federation of Greater Metro West New Jersey. Before I begin, I'd like to thank our CEO, Dov Ben Shimon, President David Saginaw, Security Committee Chairwoman Renee Galish, and all of the lay leaders on our Security Committee for all of their support. Who we are and how others see us can impact our safety in public spaces and how we might experience harassment or aggression. The increase in reported hate crimes ranging from verbal attacks to assaults is leaving many afraid for their families and their own personal safety. It can be difficult, even dangerous, to be the target of racially or ethnically motivated violence, harassment, or intimidation. With the recent increase in racially or ethnically motivated violence, it can seem threatening and scary out there, but that doesn't mean people should live in fear. It also doesn't mean people should ignore their fears. With tensions still high related to the pandemic, economic strife, and the current social and political environment, many people are on edge. It is important at times like these that everyone knows how to handle difficult or dangerous encounters and to keep themselves and others safe. Individuals and families have very real concerns about their physical and emotional safety, and many wonder what they can do to protect themselves and their loved ones. Others who are not necessarily the targets of harassment or violence recognize that hateful behavior is never okay. It's unacceptable and illegal. Those who witness acts of harassment or of racially or ethnically motivated violence can help. They don't simply have to be bystanders. They can be upstanders. Whether someone is concerned about their own safety or the safety of others who may be the targets of bias-based violence and hostility, there are things they can do that can make a real difference. Today, we are presenting the RADAR program that was developed and will be presented by Steve Crimando. Our goal in presenting this training is to aid our community in navigating hostile encounters. RADAR stands for Recognize, Avoid, Diffuse, and Redirect. This training is designed to provide an easy to learn, remember, and employ approach to handling hostile encounters safely and effectively. This program is designed to increase confidence and decrease fear. No special strength, speed, or skills are required to utilize the RADAR approach for increasing personal safety and security. Before I turn the training over to Steve, a little bit about his background. Steve's a behavioral scientist and internationally recognized expert in violence prevention. Steve's a certified threat manager, a certified in homeland protection professional, a board certified expert in traumatic stress. He's conducted training for businesses, law enforcement, intelligence, and military organizations worldwide. With more than 30 years of frontline experience, Steve was a responder to both the 1993 and the 2001 World Trade Center attacks, coordinated crisis efforts at the Northeast Anthrax Screening Center, and worked on such cases as the Unabomber attack and the Oklahoma City bombing. He's frequently called upon as an expert to the media and the courts, appearing on network, cable TV news, and talk programs. He's the author of countless professional journals and magazine articles. A final reminder, before we begin today's training, we want you to know that it's being in a webinar format, which will allow you to ask questions by using the Q&A function, which should be located at the bottom of your screen. We'll do our best to answer all of your questions. Thanks, and over to you, Steve.
Thanks, Bob. Thank you so much for the introduction, and we'll take just a second to get myself organized here and get our screens going, or slides going rather. So thanks so much again for the very warm welcome and introduction. You know, what Bob said in summary, when we think about the need for these skills and these ideas in RADAR, is we're living in a very, very dynamic and a very complex sort of environment right now. The pandemic, obviously, the sort that we're having right now is more or less a 1 in 100 year sort of situation. And so much else is going on in the world around us today that there probably has not been a more important time lately, at least, for us to refresh ourselves about the need for really a higher level of vigilance and to improve upon our skills and our ideas for making ourselves, our friends, or families safe during these challenging times. Now, as Bob also mentioned, the ideas that we share here are easy to learn, easy to remember, and easy to employ. And they work best when we actually start to use these in everyday life, not necessarily just waiting for the one difficult or hostile encounter. So as we think about this, when there were precarious times, financial stress, concerns about health, this is a time that actually creates more of a climate for possible division, for hostility and anger, for, again, projection of people's fears towards the other, towards people of any other sort of group. So we're in a very, very different situation right now, where really, as Bob said, none of the behavior that we've seen an increase in is acceptable. Certainly, most of it is illegal. But we, again, have to take some control over the things we can control by increasing our own personal safety through, again, more knowledge, more skills, and a higher level of vigilance. As we think about this, then, certainly most people are familiar with the idea of a hate crime. A hate incident is usually those sort of difficult, emotionally unsettling situations where someone may be calling out names or slurs or trying to harass us in some way. A hate crime crosses that line when it involves actually a breach of criminal law, something, again, usually involves physical violence or damage. But either way, these instances need to be recognized for what they are. They need to be reported, and we do need to be in a state of readiness should we be encountering one of these, whether it's on our streets, in our communities, on a college campus, any of the places we go. The people who commit these crimes themselves, really are not necessarily healthy or strong or really well put together people. They're usually individuals who have their own failings, people who, again, are afraid themselves and look to tear others down, look for ways to feel powerful, look for ways, again, to exert their influence when they feel no real degree of control in their own lives. And this climate that we're in, certainly in the wake of the constant spikes and surges of the pandemic, the economic fallout of the pandemic, many other things going on around us, is that sort of environment that leaves many people feeling powerless. And some people certainly act out on that by trying to exert power over others. None of this makes it right, but I do want to set the stage early that the individuals who would use these tactics of harassment, of bullying, of intimidation are not necessarily stronger or smarter or in any way really able to use or I guess, project their sense of power in any typical or productive way. And very often they resort to these counterproductive ways. Of course, that this sort of harassment can take place anywhere. This could be, as I said, in a school, on the street corner, walking back and forth to services. It could be any sort of setting. And what that means to us is, without, again, being paranoid, we do have to remain in a state of vigilance because these sort of situations can happen at any time and they could happen in anywhere. Now, when I talk about these incidents, obviously we think about these a little bit on a continuum, where at one end, they could be uncomfortable stares or looks or comments. They could be vulgar gestures or whistles or sounds people making. They could be intimidating us by following us too closely. And of course, it could be outright anti-Semitic, racist, xenophobic sorts of slurs or comments that are really directed right towards us and directed to be very hurtful. As I mentioned, these happen anywhere, they happen everywhere. And it means that we need to be, as I said, in a state really of awareness. And we're going to talk about awareness in a few different ways today that is not necessarily, as I said, making us uncomfortable or paranoid, but putting us in a position of readiness to respond in an effective way as quickly as possible. And one of my favorite authors, speaking about personal security for years, has been Gavin de Becker. And in his earliest book, The Gift of Fear, de Becker had used what I thought was a very important quote, saying that someone else may decide that we would be a target, but we actually play a role. We can actually play a role in deciding whether we will be a victim. There are things that we could do. There are things that we could say, whether we're the direct target of someone's hostility, or as Bob said, we're a bystander, or as we'll explain, an upstander in that situation. There are things we could do to change that equation and certainly not be that victim. So Going back to the name of the program and this acronym, we're talking about basic steps: recognizing, avoiding, diffusing, and redirecting those hostile situations in a way that we can make ourselves and others around us safe and secure and comfortable. But this starts early on with the recognition that these things can happen anytime and anywhere, and starting to create a plan for that. There's actually very interesting behavioral science around this idea. And it's a concept known as prospective hindsight. And this is actually research done at Harvard that tells us that when we play the what if game, when we go through the process of mental rehearsal, thinking through various scenarios, discussing with those around us how we would handle those situations before they happen, we greatly increase the likelihood of a successful outcome. Now, in this context, a successful outcome really means making ourselves and others around us safe and comfortable. But it also means we have to go through the discomfort of thinking about sometimes very unpleasant things that could happen to us and others, those hostile encounters or difficult situations, thinking them through, talking them through with our friends and family, and coming up with plans. Let me give you a very, very quick example. Going back now several years, when I was a young parent, my wife and I had discussions early on. And we have an approach, and it's not unique to us, but many of the people use the same sort of idea that was known as the sword and the shield. And the sword and the shield was a very basic idea that if, for example, we're walking through a parking lot, leaving a store, and we had some sort of difficult or challenging encounter, an angry or a hostile individual, essentially, if I said to my wife, "Sweetheart, please go back in the store and see if you can find my phone. I think it left at the register." Now, I say a lot of sweet things to my wife. I never call her sweetheart. When she hears that word sweetheart, it means there's no other discussion, there's no questions. Turn around, take the kids, go back into the store and wait for me. And if I'm not back, call the police if you need to. You are the shield. You're protecting the kids. I am the sword. I'll stand out in the parking lot and deal with this hostile individual. But that was discussed and that was agreed upon way before there was any potential difficulty, because what we know is in the moment, we're not going to be in a state of mind really to come up with a plan or try to negotiate who should do what in this situation like that. So having what may be an awkward or sometimes uncomfortable conversation with friends and family about what if, thinking through roles, thinking through actions, puts you at a great advantage should you have some sort of hostile situation. So one of my first invitations to you for this presentation is not only share some of this information with others in your personal circles, but think about creating those plans. Now, one of the things we do want to share with everybody, whether they're part of our circle and part of our plan, or just really skills for ourselves, is raising our situational awareness. And a lot of people have heard this expression. Situational awareness is not just being on our toes or not just being mindful and aware of what's going on around us. It actually means purposely looking for different sorts of cues in our environment that tell us about potential risk. And the two that we think about are risks and resources. Risks are the people, places, and things that can hurt us, and resources are the people, places, and things that can help us. So let me give you a few examples to start with. If we come into an environment, walking through a parking lot, walking through a hallway in a school or a community center, we notice an individual who seems out of place. Hopefully that catches our eyes. We see that as a potential risk. I see that backpack or that box that's been left in our environment unattended. I see that as a risk. People, places, or things that may be a problem, that maybe can hurt us. But I'm at the same time scanning that environment to see what would help me if something goes wrong. Are there other people around who could help me? Is there a place I could run to for shelter? Is there a nearby phone? Where are the alarms? Where are those things that provide additional safety? So not only is it important to be scanning your environment for those potential problems, it's equally important to be scanning your environment for the potential solutions. Again, with the mindset that in crisis conditions, when we're challenged or confronted, we're not going to be in our, the state of mind to be really inventing our action plan as we go. So this is part of that planning process. We're planning by having discussions ahead of time with those people who are central to our lives. And I'm starting to raise my situational awareness day by day, looking through my, the world as I move through it for both risks and resources. Right there, if we were to stop the program and you did those two action steps, you would radically increase your safety profile in day-to-day interactions. Never mind when we have a hostile encounter. It, again, does not make us more nervous or more paranoid, but if you can start to build these into your everyday practices, it actually builds confidence and can make you more relaxed. So we start with these simple steps, having a plan, increasing our situational awareness, and knowing that part of situational awareness is trusting our instincts. There's a lot of good science today that talks about the importance of trusting your gut. And actually that our gut feeling, our instinct, our intuition is as highly and as accurate a sensory mechanism as sight and smell and touch and all of our other senses. When something feels wrong, it very often is wrong. Something is going on that may not be perceptible to our senses, but we feel it, and we need to trust that. If something feels wrong, it very likely is wrong, and our first action step should be time and distance. Move ourselves out of that environment, away from those individuals, wherever we're getting that bad feeling, until we have a chance to reassess and have a better sense of what's going on. But don't ignore our instinct, don't ignore our intuitions, and simply wait to see how things turn on. You cannot believe how often in crime victim literature, the statement is made by that person who says, I knew it, I felt it, but I didn't take action, I didn't trust my gut. So if we feel unsafe, we move away. If we're speaking with an individual who's giving us those bad vibes, we feel threatened, even if they're not making an overtly threatening statement, but their whole presence is really making us uncomfortable. One of the first ideas I would share is this idea about never sacrificing safety for rapport. Now, even later in the program, when we give some guidance on verbal de-escalation tips, we understand that if we're trying to talk to someone, trying to reason with somebody, and it's not going well, leaving too soon is almost always better than leaving too late. Don't stick around to see how it turns out. Start putting time and distance between you and that person or that place that's making you uncomfortable. And when I talk about putting time and distance between you and that person, this goes in a very important way back to situational awareness, because our next action idea is that when something goes wrong, we don't simply run from danger. We purposely run towards safety. In your own fear, your own panic, you can potentially run yourself into a more dangerous situation, a place you're cornered or you're trapped, or more sort of threatening individuals. You want to be moving purposely towards safety. What does that mean? It means that you identified safety before you got in the jam. Using that idea of situational awareness and the second R, scanning the environment for resources, you go into the environment with an exit strategy. If something went wrong in this movie theater, something went wrong in this restaurant, something went wrong anywhere I am, what is my way out? Because when it goes wrong, I want to be able to quickly move towards safety. Safety is where there may be more people. Safety is where there's lights. Safety is where there's resources, maybe even security officers or police officers. But it is not something accidental. We don't want people running purely out of fear or panic, because in many instances, they can run themselves into a more dangerous situation. Now, most of us actually do have a number of different safety sorts of technologies with us almost every day, including things as simple as our cell phone. But the cell phone doesn't help you unless it's fully operational. And by fully operational, I mean, of course, that it's charged, of course, that you have put your important contact numbers, including ICE numbers, ICE, in case of emergency, your key people in your life on that phone. And you know how to use all the features on your phone. Many phones today, and include many other cellular devices like wearables, wristwatches, and so forth, actually have pre-programmed emergency features to have you reach 911 with one touch. But learning to use that feature is not going to be effective during a moment of crisis. So understanding your technology and having it up to speed, again, creates a tremendous advantage for you. We're not in an era where you would need to run and find a payphone. Most people have one, two, and sometimes more mobile devices on us at any time. So with those basic ideas, let's start thinking about our environments. We're going to talk about some basic street smarts, how we apply those to other situations like being in a car, on a plane, on a bus, on a train, all those different transportation modes, and how we're in common places like restaurants where we can increase our safety by not just improving our vigilance, but making some smart moves. So we begin with this idea of street smarts. First of all, as we're coming and going, knowing that we're in a time of increased risk, it's very good to file a flight plan. And what I mean by filing a flight plan is simply letting other people in our lives know when we're going, when we're coming, back when we are expected to arrive at certain places. So if we don't and we encounter any sort of hostility or problem, someone is aware of that and potentially reaches out to find out what's going on with us. We understand simple ideas like dangerousness increases after dark. So we know that there's safety in numbers, that if we are having to go out, whether it's across campus, through our neighborhood, anywhere that we're moving, we understand that if we're having to do that after darkness, which is coming, unfortunately, a little bit earlier every day now as the summer starts to wind down, we try not to do that alone. Travel with a friend, travel with a coworker, and trying to stay in those places that are well lit, and again, being mindful of other risks. Risks like staying away from blind spots, doors and bushes and alleys where someone could hide, and making sure we're walking at a steady, confident pace. There's actually good science that tells us when we have our eyes up, our heads up, and we're swinging our arms as we work, it sends a very important nonverbal message to would-be attackers about our confidence, about our strength, and we're much less likely to be targeted. If we are confronted on the street as we're passing people by, we actually do encourage you to make eye contact. It's a statement of confidence and also says to the person, I see you, I know who you are, you're in my data bank now, I have an idea of who you are. And if someone starts with us, any sort of harassment, key idea, our priority is safety, not our pride. Think about that again. Our priority is our safety, not our pride. Don't take the bait. Let hostile comments, let unpleasant slurs, let these things roll off our back if we can, and keep moving, because your first strategy was time and distance. If there's a group of people again, even if you don't know them, they're not necessarily acting out, always better to walk around them than walk through them. And again, if the group starts with you, starts to harass you, we don't engage, we just try to keep moving. And as we're moving to these environments, we're trying to make sure eyes and ears are up and open, and we're fully tuned in. And we'll talk about this a little bit later, but for example, if you are someone who wears earbuds to listen to music, listen to a podcast or a book as you're out in the community walking around, perhaps maybe changing to wear just one earbud so you can hear your book or your music, but also be tuned into your environment. And obviously, avoid reading your texts and your messages and things on your phones as you're in motion, because you are missing critical information in your environment that may be giving you messages about your safety. If for some reason you think you're being followed, there are some simple strategies, first to determine if you are, and second to make yourself safe. First of all, try not to overreact. There's a good chance you're not being followed, and it may just be a coincidence. But if you start to change your pace, start to change your direction, and that person is keeping up their pace, they're moving with you, they're moving in the same direction as you, they're making the same turns, it becomes increasingly likely that they are following you. Your first idea would be to not be alone. If you can, get to a place that is public, that's populated, that's well lit, a place where you, again, are not the only person. Get your phone out, even if you're not making a call, let the person know you've got it at the ready and you can push those buttons at any times. And if you feel threatened, call the police as you're walking, let them know where you are, let them know what you look like, let them know why you feel uncomfortable, and ask for their assistance or their guidance on how to handle that situation. But don't ignore it. There are situations in which people feel that they're being followed, and guess what? They're being followed. Some of this, again, really extends to being safe in our automobiles. As we're traveling, as we're moving through parking lots, I'm going to bring my video down for a second. I want to show a graphic behind me at the same time, and we'll talk about the contact patch idea in just a moment. But basic things: having your car doors locked as you leave your vehicle, having valuables out of sight, and of course, remembering that your remote control for your keys and your door entry is actually a safety device unto itself. So if you push your button once on your remote, it opens your driver's side door. If you push it twice, it opens all the doors. If you're moving alone to a parking lot, you should only be opening your door. Take a look in your car before you get in, take a look around your car, use the one click to open only your door and get in there and then start moving, but be ready. When we talk about having your keys in your hands as you move to the parking lot, this isn't for really an offensive weapon or a defensive weapon. It's really just to improve your ability to quickly get into your vehicle without having to stumble or fumble through your pockets or your purse to look for your keys and lose valuable time. If you're traveling, even in the summer, and you need to have your windows open, we recommend you have them at ear level. Typically, this reduces the likelihood that someone could reach into your vehicle, grab your steering wheel, or anything else. And of course, a little tricky again with gas prices going up, but we try to keep at least a half a tank of gas in the vehicle at all times. You know that we can get stuck in traffic really at any time and be there for quite some time using up our gas. Now, here again to this graphic, we talk about the contact patch. So I want you to picture yourself for a moment being at a stoplight or a stop sign, and there's a vehicle in front of you. If you, from your position in the driver's seat of your vehicle, can see where the other car's tires, car, truck, whatever the vehicle, if you could see where their back tires touch the road, you see here this arrow and this caption about the contact patch. If you could see that from where you're sitting, it means that you can easily turn out of your spot without having make multiple moves if you need to leave in a hurry, if you need to drive away. If you're any closer than that, there's a good chance that if something goes wrong, think about road rage, think about a car that breaks down, think about any kind of hostile encounter, and you want to get out of there quickly, you may not be able to quickly pull out of that spot without making a number of moves if you can get out of there at all. If you leave yourself enough space where you could see that tire hit the road, you're in good position to pull out in one move. Of course, keep your eyes on the road, not just in terms of other traffic, but the road surface itself. Broken pavement, potholes, rubble, broken glass, and even the nature of the street. If you do have to park on a dead-end street, turn around and park in the direction that you would like to leave. So if you have to leave in a hurry, again, you don't have to make multiple turns or moves. This is simply referred to as parking for safety and not for convenience, much as we mentioned before when we spoke about pride, or safety rather, over pride. If you, for some reason, believe you're being followed while you're driving, similar strategy that we mentioned before when we're walking. Try not to panic, try to stay calm, and as you can, after you've locked all your doors and rolled your windows up, make the next few right turns. If you've made 3 right turns in a row and that other vehicle is behind you, it is highly likely you're being followed. Again, in a safe way, make that call to the police, let them know the nature of the car following you, why you think you're being followed, tell them where you are, ask for directions, but don't go straight home. You don't want to lead a person to your residence. You don't want to let that person who may be a hostile individual let you know where you are. And make sure, as I said before, those doors are locked, those windows are up before you get to the first stoplight or stop sign where someone, again, may be able to exit their vehicle. You, though, should not exit your vehicle. If someone starts a hostile encounter with you, if someone starts, again, some sort of difficulty, you are in a position of safety and power when you're in that vehicle. Let it protect you. Even if the person is screaming for you to come out or you feel inclined, stay in that vehicle for your protection. If for some reason your vehicle is surrounded, think today of the many different scenarios where we have had civil unrest, protests, and demonstrations, and groups on the street. And this can happen to you even on a city street absent of a protest, where there's just a number of people around. Remember that same idea. You're in a position of power and safety when you're in your vehicle. Stay in the car. If you know there's an area that's likely to have crowds, try to stay off those streets if you can. But if your car is surrounded, you do want to try your best to keep moving forward, even at a very slow pace. You don't want to give the crowd the impression you're trying to hurt them with your vehicle. Beep your horn, move, try to keep moving, if possible, forward at a slow pace, and try not to give the crowd the impression that you're being aggressive with your vehicle. If you need to, same idea, call the police, let them know where you are, what the situation is, ask for assistance or guidance, but stay in that vehicle unless it's been breached, which means someone has gotten into the vehicle, or the vehicle becomes dangerous in some way to you. Now, those are ideas for when you're walking, you are driving, you're in your vehicle. What if you're in a mass transit situation? Let's think a little bit about planes and cars, buses, trains, things of this nature. There's a few things you could do before you even get to a train stop or a bus stop. And I know that the trains and buses don't always run very close on schedule, but try to minimize your wait time where you would be standing at a bus stop or a train stop by knowing the schedule as well as possible. And if there are some stops that are more isolated than others, try to use those stops, of course, where there are more people. Again, a basic safety in numbers sort of strategy. Be alert at that place. Don't just lose yourself in your screen, reading texts and listening perhaps to music on your earbuds. Again, stay tuned into your environment and be in a position of readiness to move, whether that's move onto the bus or train, have everything ready that you need to board, or to leave that situation. Try to make sure that you're keeping yourself mobile so you have the most options possible if you need to move. On the bus, on the train, again, look for those areas, again, where you know there are likely to be other riders waiting. Try to avoid the empty cars. Again, on the subway, the conductor is typically in the middle of the train, and that's a better place to sit in case there's a problem, because you can attract their attention. And of course, towards the front of a bus to get the attention of the driver. If you are using the subways, try to use entrances and exits that are active, that are 24-hour booths, where there's likely to be an attendant. And if someone starts to make you uncomfortable in any way, time and distance, change your seats, move away from that person, inform the driver or conductor about the situation if you feel uncomfortable. Same ideas work if you're flying. You know that we've had a significant increase in not just road rage, but certainly in air rage over the last several months and throughout the pandemic, and people have been very uncomfortable in many ways flying. Same ideas. Flight attendants and airline workers are all trained in recognizing and handling air rage. Don't be alone. If someone's making you uncomfortable, let someone know. They, again, have strategies and they have some authority to really intervene in the situations. Ask to change seats, but even if you change seats, keep an eye on the person who's been harassing you. Don't, again, lose yourself in a book or a movie where you put yourself at risk. And keep an eye on that person, even as you exit the plane, move through the baggage carousel, move to the parking lot, that person hasn't followed you in some way. In the airport, in these places where we travel, there's likely to be a lot of police officers, security officers, and such. Let someone know if you feel uncomfortable. In an elevator, you may be alone. In fact, we'd suggest if you could take an elevator with no one else in it, that's probably a better strategy. But as you get in elevators, a few things we could do to increase our safety. The first of these is stand near the panel with the different controls and buttons, and make sure you are the one who presses the button for the floor you need. If someone asks what floor, and you call out 3 or 7 or 11, you need to watch that they truly push that button. Don't just assume that they have. But if you stand near that panel and something goes wrong, hit all of the buttons. And this will increase the odds that you can get off that elevator at every floor, or someone else may get on the elevator at any floor who might be able to help if you have an aggressive or hostile situation. As we're now going back to restaurants and clubs and so forth, a few things to think about in these sort of indoor spaces. As we go into a restaurant, for example, scan that environment, look at how people are sitting, but also look for where are the exits. What would be an impromptu exit, like even a large window if you needed to break that window and exit in an emergency. Try to find seating that gives you options. This means try not to sit in a corner, try not to sit in a deep booth that would be, make it difficult for you to get out of your seat in a hurry if you did have to exit. And as we think about this, try to sit perhaps away from the front desk, the register, places where there's transactions of money, which are, of course, where we do have property crimes such as robberies. Think about the position. Try, without making it very obvious, to notice where cameras are so that you're sitting in a place that's cameraed. And if you're sitting in an outdoor restaurant, try to sit along part of the sidewalk or curb that may be protected rather by cars parked along the curb, large trees, other sorts of barriers that would provide you safety from a vehicle. Now, I hate to think about it, but you even have to be concerned about an individual who may follow us home right to our doorstep. Basic idea here is, just as we have a plan for our safety in our community, on our campus, when I'm out and about at stores with my friends and family, let's have that same discussion with those people we live with, family members, roommates, anyone else in our residential environment. What's the plan? Should we have a knock on the door we're not expecting? Who goes to the door? In what situations do we open it? How do we know who's there? How will we handle it if there is actually a hostile encounter on our doorstep? Who's going to be dealing with that hostile individual, and what should the rest of us do? For example, we should know again and have a plan for getting out of our house, but also sheltering in place. A safe room is usually something that's an interior room with no windows. It's a place where we could lock the door, but you also have to remember it's a place where we have to have a cell phone signal. And just like I mentioned before, it's good to have a password or phrase that tells others in the house, there's a problem at the front door, use the plan, make yourself safe. Don't open that door until you know who it is. If it's an unwelcome or unwanted person, tell them clearly to leave, let them know you'll call the police if they don't, and do in fact call the police if they don't leave your property. Stay in well after you believe that person is gone, and make sure they're gone before you go out. And if they don't go out, as I said, let the police know, ask for assistance and advice. Now, people sometimes ask me, what does a suspicious person look like? And that's a person who's acting in a furtive manner. What does furtive mean? Sneaky. You see a person who doesn't belong. You see a person who's involved in behavior that's out of place, behavior of concern. They're taking pictures, they're taking notes, they're doing or saying things that make you uncomfortable. Make note of who they are, what time you saw them, what they look like, the physical characteristics, jot that down. And again, if they're doing anything outright dangerous or uncomfortable, let other people know. Don't be alone and don't confront them. Bring the police into the situation if need be. Now, sometimes people ask about suspicious mail. And again, Bob said in the introduction of my presentation, I'd worked on the Unabomber case. So this is one that's certainly very close to me. But if there's a letter, a package, an envelope that comes to our home that we don't recognize, it's poorly written, maybe there's stains or spills or odors coming from it, something looks wrong about that package, including strange notes like only to be opened by a certain person, don't open it, move away from it, don't let other people handle it or explore it. Call the police or the post office, let them know why you feel uncomfortable about this package and ask them what to do about it. But we know that threats and dangerousness can be moved in the mail. And it could be a package left in your home, near your home, a box, a suitcase, a backpack. You're familiar with the ideas of see something, say something. If something is out of place, again, don't go explore it. Keep your distance. Don't be opening it or looking into it, and let others know who can make a difference. So this remains, again, based on the idea of situational awareness, that you know what your baseline environment looks like, and you would notice if somebody or something were out of place. If we are in fact confronted with aggressive or hostile behavior, which we did talk about earlier, coming in many different forms, we mentioned before, there's safety in numbers. Try to get to other people, or again, bring other people into a situation we can help you. But if the person has said something or done something and tries to leave the environment, don't try to hold them back, okay? Don't, again, take the bait. Remember this idea about our safety over our pride. But do try to keep escape routes open for yourself. And as we said earlier, leaving too soon is typically better than leaving too late. Stay calm, be firm. If it's a situation where this is an office environment, it's a college campus, and someone could sit down to talk to you, encourage that and use verbal de-escalation techniques. We'll introduce a few of those in a moment. But remember, you're not there to be the person's therapist or counselor. If they're not responding to your efforts to calm the situation, your better strategy is leaving it and making yourself safe. So one of the strategies is bring other people around, knowing that there's safety in numbers, calling to someone who may be passing by. Excuse me, can you help me? Can you stay with me for a few moments until it's safe? I'm having some trouble here. Can you please call 911 for me? But don't be afraid to ask other people to assist you. We know it very quickly changes the equation if you are not alone one-on-one in a hostile encounter. Now, most of us would recognize the signs and signals of escalation. Certainly, as we see a person's posture, their volume, their tone, we see their stance, we hear changes in their voices, sometimes clenched fists or clenched jaws. The person is closing in on our personal space. There's many, many different common signals of escalation. And what I would suggest to you is believe them. Even if a person says verbally that they're calm and in their control, but you see through their body language and their posture that they are becoming more irate or aggressive, believe what you see over what you hear. It is much harder for people to mask their nonverbal behavior. If you see or hear the signs of escalation, start thinking about that exit plan. Hopefully you're not starting from scratch, but remember, this is the way out. Maintain eye contact, be firm, keep your distance from the person. We'll talk about how we adjust our stance here about our shoulders in a moment, and we start to increase our safety. For example, one of the easiest ways we do this is we adjust our stance. The safety stance means rather than being head on to the person with our feet, again, parallel and squared off in this confrontational sort of stance, what we're going to do is shuffle our feet into what we refer to as the L position. Our feet are perpendicular. Simply by doing this, we break that confrontational staff. It means we're probably turning our shoulders, which makes us a smaller and a less vulnerable target. It puts us in a position where we have greater balance and we have greater agility to move quickly to escape that situation. So you want to do this quietly. We want to do this smoothly in a very sort of low-key way, but we begin to adjust our stance. When we think about nonverbal communication, a very important idea that comes from the behavioral sciences, quite simply, is the more agitated, angry, or upset people become, the more dependent they become on nonverbal communication and the less they could actually process verbal information. What this means to us is we have to change how we're communicating and start to really emphasize our nonverbal communications. You see in this pie chart, very simply, they include things like our facial expression, tone of voice, our movement appearance, things of this nature that we'll dig in further in a moment. But more specifically, we think about adjusting our paraverbal communication. And in very, very simple language, paraverbal communication is not what we say, but how we say it. And this includes our volume, rate, tone, and our inflection. If you haven't been introduced to this idea before, it is based on a neuroscience concept known as entrainment. Entrainment is the idea that our mirror neurons, part of our natural brain structure, is the part of our brains that allows us to read and respond to social cues and has us synchronized with other people. And what I mean by synchronize is quite simply, you know this, if you're hanging out with someone who's relaxed, it tends to be relaxing for us. If you're hanging out with someone who's very anxious, it makes us more anxious. If someone is being very loud with us, the instruction here or the recommendation is we start speaking a little more loudly than we normally do. Gradually and incrementally, we start to bring our volume down. Typically, even unknown to the person subconsciously, unconsciously, they begin to follow us down as well. This is the neurological principle of entrainment. Now, the way these techniques work best is when you start to build them into your everyday life. It's a loud discussion at home, with family, with friends, any place you go. So when you do run into a potentially hostile situation, these techniques become very familiar, accessible, and automatic to you. So here's the key idea. The most important thing I could share with you about these principles. We're not trying to control the other person. We're trying to influence how the other person controls themselves by how we control ourselves. We're going to, in this instance, control our volume. If a person is very upset, very worked up, and they're speaking very quickly, the same principle applies. We may start speaking more quickly than we normally do. Gradually and incrementally, we start to slow ourselves. And in most instances, the person unknowingly follows us down to this calmer way of speaking. We speak about tone. We're being very careful about anything that comes across as sarcastic or condescending. And unless you know the person well, I would avoid the use of humor. Person, again, who's very upset, very angry, and thinks we're making fun of the situation. Lastly, inflection. How we may emphasize sometimes a word, a phrase, or even a syllable that completely changes the entire meaning. Very simply, again, an example. If I use a simple sentence, I didn't say you were stupid, and I change the inflection. I didn't say you were stupid means someone else did. I didn't say you were stupid means I'm thinking it. I didn't say you were stupid. I'm speaking about your friend over there. I didn't say you were stupid. You don't want to know what I said, but it wasn't that. Those are 4 clearly different messages using the same sentence, showing you how important inflection is in changing the meaning. But if we do have an outright hostile or dangerous encounter, remember what I've said a few times. We're prioritizing safety over our pride. Trust your instincts, trust your intuition. Don't simply react to the situation. We want to respond in a purposeful way. Think about time and distance. Think about bringing other people, bystanders, into the situation. Think about recording the situation with a photograph, a video, or recording, so we have evidence of that. And call the police, as I said, and get them involved early on. But whatever we need to use, a whistle, a phone, anything at our disposal to either notify others or protect ourselves, please do use everything that is within your range to make yourself safe. Now, many people have been exposed to or introduced to the ideas of run, hide, fight in the context of active shooter preparedness. And we know the same ideas work here when we think about any sort of dangerous situation. Run is time and distance between ourselves and the threat. Get out, get away, leave everything behind if we can, help others if we can, but get ourselves personally away from the threat. Hide is cover and concealment. Cover means that something large and heavy, a tree, a door, a wall, is between us and the threat where that person can't hurt us. Concealment means the person can't see us, so we're hiding out until the threat is past. And lastly, fight means everything you have to disarm, disrupt, distract a potential attacker, again, until we can get away from the situation or others come to our aid. But remember, we are not powerless in these situations. And most people are not expecting really us to respond. They're thinking we're going to react, and sometimes reacting actually gives them more power and control. If a vehicle is used for an attack, we're outdoors, a restaurant, sitting in a curbside cafe. Again, we know that we need to make ourselves safe using the same ideas of run, hide, fight. But as we sit down, I mentioned this before with restaurants, look for places that have those natural barriers. Look for places of natural refuge where you could run into an open store or doorway or alley to make yourself safe if there's a hostile vehicle on the sidewalk or coming down the street or just moving erratically through crowds or traffic. Keep your eyes up, keep your eyes open when you're in these public places so that you can see how the crowds ahead of you are reacting. And use whatever sort of protections have been provided to you. If there are barriers or bollards at streets and around public places, they're there for your protection. Try to use them and stay behind them. If there has been a vehicle attack, your priority is your own personal safety and others around you. Don't, again, approach the vehicle. Don't approach the driver. Get away, make yourself safe. After any kind of physical encounter, whether it's, again, involving a vehicle or weapons or just a hostile encounter, take a few moments to collect yourself. Take a few breaths, make some notes, call someone and let people know what happened. And again, be prepared to provide information to the police, because in many instances, if not most, these sorts of encounters actually are illegal as well. So try to be observant about the person, as well as where, when, and how the situation unfolded. If you are someone who witnesses one of these instances, what we've referred to before as a racially or ethnically motivated violent situation, you have another choice to make as a witness. And that's the difference between being a bystander of someone who stands by and watches this, or an upstander of someone who jumps in a meaningful way to help. But you do have to prioritize your safety first. You do have to think, is this a place where it is safe for me to jump in? And if it is, trust your judgment, get into that situation, but your focus is on the person who is being targeted, not on the aggressor. Take a deep breath, steel yourself again, speak out in a calm, firm voice, but ask that person how you could help them. Can I get you away from this? What can I do to help? Would you like me to call the police? And instantly you've conveyed an important message to the would-be attacker or hostile individual that the individual is no longer alone. So there are 5 Ds in upstander intervention. Distract, and that is anything to just break into the conversation between the hostile person and the person who's being targeted. It could be something silly like asking for directions. It could be more purposeful, but distract them and break the dynamic. Delegate, call to other people. Hey, somebody call the police. Somebody come and help. Ask again to bring other people into the environment. Delay means perhaps you see this hostile encounter happening, you're witnessing it, but you determine it's not safe for you to intervene yet. You could stay at the periphery. You could call out to the person, hey, do you need help? Do you want me to call the police? Again, letting the would-be attacker or hostile party know that others are now aware and others are involved. Direct, speak to the attacker, be firm and clear, back off, leave this person alone, they're not bothering you, and focus your attention on the person who was the target. Are you okay? Should we get help? Can we get out of here? And if you document this, which is the 5th D, that may be a video, a picture, or notes, you never share that information unless you do so with the permission of the person who was targeted. Let them know you have it. Let them know you'll share it with them if they want it as evidence, but you keep it confidential. Now, one of the things we strongly encourage is if you have witnessed or you've been the victim of any sort of hostile encounter of this type, especially one that is tinged or tainted with this sort of racial or ethnic or religious hostility, again, make a report. Let people know. We know these are tremendously upsetting situations to go through. They shake our confidence in other people. They shake our confidence in ourselves. They make us just wonder what's wrong with people, what's going on in the world today. They're very unsettling. But at a larger level, these sort of events just tear at our social fabric and our democracy. They run counter to everything we believe in, and they actually lead to more violence. So it is important to not only get help for yourself emotionally, share with other people what's happened, talk to someone if you've been through one of these really toxic sort of situations, get the help you need for yourself, and let other people know, including making a police report. Even if you weren't the target of that violence, you are a witness to that. Think about what we refer to as vicarious sort of consequences, almost like secondhand smoke. You weren't the smoker, but you're breathing other people's smoke. Here, you weren't the target of the violence, but you witness it, and it can be very unsettling. Still a good indication to get some assistance for yourself if it's really emotionally shaken you. But as I said, this doesn't stop unless we make reports. We let our law enforcement partners, our Homeland Security partners know what happened, where it happened, and how, because this is how they get involved. It can stop these trends and stop these patterns of behavior. But please don't be ashamed. Don't be in a place where you feel that you shouldn't report, or maybe it wasn't that bad. Every one of these situations is important, and it's important for us to play our role. And that role includes not having just a strategy or an approach to making ourselves safe, but knowing that we're part of the larger societal response by reporting this and helping to put an end. So in closing out our content, and they'll be available for a few moments for questions and discussions, although it does seem really unstable out there at times and maybe more frightening than it's been, we know that on one hand, you don't have to walk around being fearful, but you do have to raise your game in terms of vigilance and skills. And that means learning what things are within our control, focusing on those, and going back to that quote earlier, understanding that we do not have to be a victim. Part of that is knowing that we don't want to react, we want to respond, and we want to get our friends, family, and others around us in that response as well. But as I mentioned once or twice in the presentation, these techniques work best when you think about them ahead of time, you mentally rehearse and play the what if game. They work best when you build them into your daily routine, so they're very accessible. So I want to thank you very much, leave you my contact information if anyone does want to reach out to me personally to get more information, and turn it back over to Bob for a few moments. We'll handle a few closing questions and comments. Thanks, everybody, and thanks, Bob.
Thank you very much, Steve. I really appreciate the information you shared with us today. I think it's so important because it's useful for our students at our schools, students at colleges, our congregates at our houses of worship, and even our employees at our agencies that may be confronted with this type of, hostile behavior, whether it be racially or ethnically motivated or otherwise. We have had unfortunately, some incidents within our community, and, I figured, because I haven't had any questions as of right now, but I kind of just put them out there. Maybe you could talk about how it might have been best to respond. We had a woman walking home from services at a synagogue. She was confronted by a passing motor vehicle where the person yelled out harassing statements and actually threatening statements towards her. She was alone by herself with an infant child in a stroller. And, there was some question of how best to have responded to that. And what are your thoughts on that, Steve?
Well, Bob, to a few of the points we made, there's a difference between reacting and responding. And sometimes when people are saying or doing hurtful things, there's a natural tendency to react, yell something back, give them a sign or a signal, and just in some ways take the bait. So the best strategy is with someone who's passing by, they're driving by, for example, is the understanding that they're moving and likely they're going to be out of your environment pretty quickly. It's unpleasant, it's toxic, it's embarrassing perhaps, but it's best simply to keep our focus, keep our eyes ahead, be aware of where that other vehicle or those people are, but keep ourselves moving in our intended pathway, not take the bait, not call back to them. And when you get to a place where you're safe, and you should do that sooner than later, don't wait till you go all the way home. And in fact, maybe a better strategy is not to go directly home, is to make that call to police, make a report of this, where you were, what you remember of what the people said, what you remember of the vehicle they were in, if they were driving, what the person looked like or the group, and let people know. Very often, the thing we don't realize with making reports to police, Bob, is we think we're having this very unique and isolated experience. And you don't know that the police haven't had 5 other calls that day of exactly the same behavior. And now they're actually on the lookout for that car and that group of people. And the information we shared, which seemed maybe that it wasn't very useful to us, is tremendously useful to our law enforcement and intelligence partners. So keep moving, don't take the bait, get to a safe place, make that call and report it. And then if you need to, debrief children or others who are with you, talk about what happened, talk about the type of people who are involved in that behavior. Again, give children or others a chance to express how they thought and felt about it, but don't ignore it. And don't ignore it means not taking the bait, but letting other people know about your experience.
Great, thank you very much. Earlier you mentioned about making sure that you report it, and I just wanted to, to share with our community members and those on the video here that, certainly from the Jewish Federation of Greater Metro West area, if you have an incident, that's non-emergent, that you're afraid to report to the police or otherwise, and you're not in danger at that current time, feel free to contact me through the Federation. Everybody should have my number, but it's R. Wilson. My email also is rwilson@jfedgmw.org. You can email me, or just go to our webpage. We actually have a reporting function on the Jewish Federation of Greater Metro West New Jersey's Safety and Security webpage. And that's going to be a place where we are recording this video, and the video will reside there for those of you that found it useful and may want to share with others in your organization or friends. Feel free to send them a hyperlink. It should be up within a week from today. We do not have any questions at this point in time, Steve. So I just really want to thank you again for your time. I want to thank all the people that made the time to participate in this. I hope it was helpful to them. And I look forward to being able to help anyone that has any security or safety concerns. Thank you very much.